Welcome back to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast. I'm your host, Scott Shigori. Here on DT, we talk about scaling tech companies and helping CEOs do this with greater ease and flow. Today, we'll be talking with Daniel Sweet. Daniel is the founder and managing partner of SweetView Partners. SweetView takes healthy businesses in Texas from $1 to $20 million in revenue and brings them up to the next stage in their journey. Daniel's background is in tech, like it is for all of us, and he's on several investment and company boards. In a prior life, he worked for HP, AT&T, and BHP. Daniel, thank you for carving out time to chat with us today, and welcome to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and, kick something off here, because you and I have known each other for a number of years, through kind of the business acquisition space and that sort of thing. And I'm wondering, just to set the context for stuff for yourselves at SP, what are right now your core focus buying areas, by industry and or by sector or solution, depending on how you guys like to define that?
Sure. So we usually go after companies that we have a background in operating. It gives us a greater percentage of chance of success here. So we those are in three main areas. Those are in technology, energy, and construction. Between myself and my partner, we've got a deep background in those industries.
Gotcha. Yeah. In terms of, because again, I know a little bit about the work that you guys do. You're obviously pretty prolific on LinkedIn, obviously, and so forth. The area, say, in oil and gas, is that midstream, upstream? And say in tech, is it around services like managed service providers, or do you like merging tech and, let's say, oil and gas in some ways so that there's overlap for you where you've got kind of a dual understanding of what's going on, depending on what those service areas are, or are they separate? How do you guys like to think about that?
So I like to merge tech and everything, just because I have 27 years in tech. Generally speaking, the size businesses that we get involved with, their tech stack is pretty thin. And I was born into the right ideal time. All the things that I learned to implement and put into practice to bring business results to very large businesses, enterprise-sized businesses, years ago, are now available cheaply for small business. Yeah. So I know the things that are possible, and now they're really affordable. So I can roll them into small business and increase their efficiency as well. So I like tech and everything. In the oil and gas space, we generally stick to midstream. That's always flowing, regardless of politics, administrations, the current trend in we love oil, we hate oil, whatever. Midstream always flows. So we do midstream services there. In tech, we're pretty agnostic. Now, my history is primarily technology services. But we're pretty broad on tech just because really any tech company ultimately is technology services. And so we really focus pretty broadly there. And then construction is really anything that builds primarily infrastructure. And we tend to focus more on trades than in the contracting world, GC world, because the GC world is really a handful of people that then go and sub the trades. So we focus on where the work actually happens.
Yeah, no, and that makes a lot of sense. I know some of my listeners will know I worked for Raytheon for over 20 years, and there were many circumstances where other contractors, we would be obviously the major that would actually do the general contracting, and then we would bring in subbies, either because it was a requirement itself due to the nature of government, and federal contracting, but beyond that too, because of the level of complexity involved in bidding for those contracts, as well as just the amount of time and energy that a smaller firm simply would not have. And many contracts, as you well know, and it's true basically everywhere, there's not always a lot of differentiation with that. You're bidding based on, I'll call it a spec or an SOP of some sort. And the challenge ends up being that they'll pick and choose the best from everything and just keep, often, at least in government contracting here in DC, oftentimes rewrite stuff in a way that gets them the best that they want, but essentially forces others to compete in ways that makes things tough. So the smaller ones, yeah, they just wait until the contract's won and then just reach out to us, reach out to Northrop Grumman, reach out to whomever. So yeah, I can definitely understand understand the desire there. It's frustrating. Yeah. What do you think, is most misunderstood about what SuiteView Partners actually does for, again, someone who is selling, someone who is maybe even partnering with you or alongside of yourselves? What do you feel is a set of questions around being what is you guys being in essentially the financial and operating space?
So the initial and most common misunderstanding is that we're a broker, just because people are familiar with brokers. Mm-hmm. And they're familiar with large PE firms, which we're not a large PE firm. We don't have our own fund. Mm-hmm. We focus on acquisitions and operations, and we do a separate fundraise for each one. So our category is a weird one for most people, just that they haven't seen it before. And so they try to slot us into a category they understand. And again, what we do isn't complicated. It's just that they haven't heard of it a lot. So we usually get slotted into some other piece of the industry. Yeah. And we just have to explain, no, we acquire for our own portfolio, and we look to build up companies and tack on additional companies to grow them from the entrepreneurial stage, which we say is 0 to 1, to the next stage. So we specialize in 1 to 2, growing some infrastructure, adding some layers of management, perhaps, obviously technology, which I love, making everything work better. And the way I put it is make it into its own standalone organism, whereas the entrepreneurial phase is absolutely dependent on the entrepreneur, and it has to be at that stage.
Yeah.
We focus on getting it to a point where it can stand on its own feet, doesn't require an owner or a specific leader to keep operating. Gotcha. And then the next stage is usually many more layers of management that we let other people do that.
Yeah, it's understood. I think, what is fascinating to me about bootstrapped or accidental entrepreneurs is that unlike those that are, heavily funded up front to then figure out what it is that they could possibly do with, again, an opportunity in aggregate, is that they actually have identified something in the marketplace where there was a gap, there was something that was missing. It was large enough to obviously go after, and even if it's a tech pile behind what is effectively that company, has been able to identify, been able to sell, been able to serve or provide service delivery, and been able to conclude that and either do some form of repeat business, if it's, some form of ARR, et cetera, which is actually we tend to ignore it, but it's a very difficult thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
And the number of companies, even in the US, as developed as we are, that gets to $1 million in revenue in the tech space, or in any space for that matter, is in single digits. It's really quite a small thing. So what they've accomplished to date, even if it is a bit of a lot of a tech pile in the background, is quite a special and a remarkable thing, which again, I don't think we always appreciate the way that we should.
Oh, absolutely. The hardest part really is finding your market. And for them to, like you say, recognize value in what you do and keep coming back because you keep serving that area that they need. Creating that repeat customer base and greater knowledge about the company is the hardest part. And it's the biggest reason most startups, tech or otherwise, tech has a little bit more of a problem here, but the biggest reason they fail is because they struggle and get sideswiped by something out of their control before they can really find their market and tune them in.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think, it was a mistake I made or thought about incorrectly earlier in my career, where I thought, company A works incredibly hard in the team, and the value that gets created is something that they create and they go ahead and effectively share. But in fact, the value is what the customer gets, what they define as, they need, as you and I are familiar with the term, the kind of level 10 bleeding neck problem that client A or B has. It's the value that those clients get, not per se with what you're building, that classic in tech world being, build it and they will come, and you overcapitalize or you just miss the mark. And there are lots and lots of stories of those. But here, that's obviously, not the case. Given that you guys focus on, and I'll put this in quotes so that we can, expand on it here, healthy businesses.
Yeah.
Are you guys defining it by profitability, by a strategic moat, by the team's track record, or something else, given what you guys do, which is, pretty broad based, being tech, being oil and gas, being midstream, et cetera, which is a fairly open mandate. But what does healthy mean to you guys?
So there's a number of facets to that. The number one is financially, just because there are so many small businesses that financially aren't saleable. And since that we run into that regularly, that's usually our first check is, okay, are they financially profitable, stable, run well, such that we can actually acquire them without, putting a boat anchor around our neck? So that's number one. But secondarily, the next several items that we look for are, we look for companies that are well built for the operations piece, but almost always the business admin piece has been left to fester. They're really good at the delivery of whatever it is.
Yeah.
But they're awful at the rest of business, and often don't have a professional sales organization, don't take advantage of the tax breaks they could, really? Don't have a great way to retain their employees through benefits and the like. And certainly financially aren't managing to the most optimum. What does the AR aging look like? What does the AP aging look like? And usually they're the reverse of where they ought to be. So usually AR is out beyond 60 days, and AP, because your administrators inside the company are trying to be very responsible, they pay them as quickly as possible. So AP is at 10 days, and it really ought to be the reverse for your best cash flow management. Your AR should be pulled in within 30. Your AP should be pushed out maybe to almost 60 if you can. And you capture that cash flow in the middle now instead of giving it to other people. So there's lots of little things that they're not usually doing that we can take advantage of. So we look for that, and then look for the ability to grow. Obviously, we like to grow these up to the next stage, and they have to be able to do that. A lot of companies that end up plateau are for a variety of internal reasons. But whatever they are, they, after 20 years, they get pretty fixed. And so breaking them loose is enough work. I'm a lazy guy. Listen, I buy companies that exist because I don't want to have to go build my own audience. I buy companies that are easy to grow because I don't want to have to take the sledgehammer and break off all the crust and make something that doesn't want to change. So we're looking for those sorts of things in a company that we want to acquire and grow.
Yeah. And that essentially, I think you've answered, the question around what is your investment thesis. The easy answer is, of course, we want scale, we want that, but it isn't around the operational levers of where relevant accounts payable and receivables, where there are materials relevant there, or in other areas of the balance and cash flow statement and so forth, to try and, again, both stabilize as well as then strengthen that particular financial moat. Because something I'm sure I certainly see it a lot is that many tech entrepreneurs have the mindset that they will, quote unquote, pay themselves later, meaning that,
and later never comes.
Later never comes. So let's pretend you're a CEO and you're worth $200K a year. That's, the outgoing rate for what you do. You're paying yourself half. And so you think you're investing effectively and engaged in delayed gratification, when in fact, and you'll make it up at some point in the future. Either you get bought out or there's some other big change or something like that. Oftentimes that day never comes, unfortunately, and therefore it's just a real mismatch and creates, I think, no pun intended, downstream all sorts of problems with, retaining employees, keeping family members and spouses happy, to being able just to go on vacation without maxing out and juggling 5 different credit cards, as crazy as that is. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Given that I'm I think it's fair to say that most of the companies that you, or those that you talk to, are bootstrapped or accidental entrepreneurs in Texas.
Mhm.
What unique challenges do you find they have in trying to sell their company? Not necessarily, it could be to yourself, of course, in making the pitch, but
And it ought to be.
more broadly, of course it should, yes, or at least come to you guys first.
Right.
Yeah. So what is it that either it's a unique challenge, or, and you touched on it before, either they're misunderstanding, but kind of maybe from their standpoint,
Mhm.
either they've talked to you early on, or maybe it's been later on. What is the unique set of either biggest challenge that they find in their own eyes or from their own vantage point around selling their company?
The biggest challenge to getting the value that many of them think they ought to get is the fact that they have run them their entire lives. The lesson they've learned from their accountant is how to make a tax efficient operation. And they've done a good job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the downside to that is you've explicitly given up profit or restructured profit so that you didn't pay taxes on it, which makes complete sense.
Yep.
However, businesses that are sold are valued based on how much profit they produce.
Yep.
So if you've got that profit so fine tuned, you've basically got a $0 break even every year, and you celebrate every year you're not paying taxes to the IRS. That's awesome, right up until you sell, at which point a multiple of 0 is roughly 0.
Yeah.
So that's the tough part. And we work with the small business owners to try and figure out what the real profit, actually we're looking for cash flow, what the real cash flow is on the business. And that's how we value it. But that is not as many companies are as flexible as we are. And so if you're looking to sell for the best price possible, for the price that maybe even in your head, it pays to start dropping a lot of that money to the bottom line, even if you have to pay taxes on it. And particularly if you can get that done prior to sale. So in an ideal world, that's 3 years before sale that you're going to start to drive as much profit as you can. Because you're going to have a great 3-year average, which is then you apply the multiple to, and you'll make as much as you can. So that's the biggest problem most commonly that they have, is they're running the business for the best benefit to themselves, which is great. Now they've got to think about a different primary audience for that business, and that is the buyer, who's what they're really buying is profit, right? I don't want to buy a company that takes all the money I put into it and chews it all up and spits out nothing. That's of no real benefit to me. So that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because a couple of weeks ago I was interviewing Anthony Nitsos. He runs a company called SaaS Gurus, which helps funded and unfunded or bootstrapped entrepreneurs in obviously the SaaS space. And he said, over and over again, something he sees a great deal of. And he said it's an immediate, not so much flag, but he said it tells him a great deal right up front, which is when he sees as a line item, to your point, for basically, because SaaS doesn't have a lot of ARR, it doesn't have a lot of, that sort of thing. But he said if there's just one line for all of the employees as an expense, because for SaaS, a huge chunk of their cost structure is employees, whether it's full-time equivalents or contractors or whatever. He said, I know instantly, just on that line item alone, that they have been advised by a tax-focused CPA that is optimized around exactly that. And so as a result, he knows instantly to an extent what you've talked about, and then what he expects to see, basically behind the hood, and that it is not optimized, which usually also means that their service and contract offerings have not been optimized also to be defined by, say, an ARR metric as opposed to one time. So the valuation on multiple fronts just gets very, very compressed. And to your point, you can always go back and restate or reorganize, your financials, but you've probably optimized cash flow around that to do something with your business or to pay for your child's, horseback riding lessons or something in between that. So it just ends up being quite difficult. So if you've got 3, ideally 5 years if you want of time, but many don't. If it's a health issue or it's something where they've got a divorce or other circumstances, they don't have that luxury, which really is so regrettable after a long period of time of dedication and just a lot of expertise in that particular area, which is just that they've created over literally decades, etc. like that. Yeah, it's just painful.
I have a speech coming up somewhere, but it is specifically that issue, why you should prepare your company for sale now. And the main reasons are most of the small business owners I talk to are exiting their businesses not because they wanted to at that point, because they're basically, most entrepreneurs want to do what they're doing until they die right there in the company, because it's the most fun thing they can think of. But life comes along and is usually health issues, theirs or their families. It could be a variety of other issues, having to take care of the grandchildren because something happened to the children, or all these kinds of things that pop up that knock people out of their businesses. It's usually not planned. So the average business owner thinks, well, I've got years to think about that. I don't need to worry about it. But when it's time to sell, it's our experience when we're talking to sellers is that it's probably about 80% of the time, it's something that was involuntary that is causing them to sell. So they have no time to plan now. So planning early on, and you can still do the same things. I am not an accountant, and you should not treat me as such. But if I were creating a business that I wanted to prepare for sale, while still retaining the tax benefits, I would pay myself a consulting fee to my own S corp for a lot of those tax efficiencies that I usually build into the P&L. So if they're all basically one line item that goes to a separate company, that is my consulting company, I can point to that and say, there's the profit that I'm not showing because I'm doing it this way, but that you will get. It's a single line item. It's very easy. It's easy to see. It's not integral to operations, which is the hard part about pulling pieces around.
I see. Yep.
And so you can just point to one line item forever that says, this item, this is basically pure profit for you, to a seller, to a buyer rather. And you still have an optimized company for taxes and much more ready for sale.
Interesting. Okay. I've heard a number of different strategies over the years. We obviously both hear about them. I hadn't quite heard that one where, again, if you are someone who is either A, wanting to hold on to it, or B, again, making it explicit, let's say you did have a health issue, you wanted to retain ownership, but you needed, some professional leadership, or you did something else, you could easily point to that as well as a way of saying, hey, this is what we do, or what I do earn. We can do this and that and so forth too, or to manage other obligations with family members if your cap stack happens to have, as many companies do, lots of family members, to either make it complicated to sell, or B, go ahead and have a circumstance where you've got just a need to, if you will, juggle things a bit differently. Gotcha. Yeah.
And doing that, by the way, still not an accountant. If you are creating a strategy to protect your assets and to pass as many of those assets to your heirs as possible, eventually, that consulting company can be your family trust. So the money that you're taking out of the business as basically pure profit to yourself can go into your family trust where your assets are, which, oh, by the way, now you can pay for those assets through the trust and not through your own personal self, so that you've protected your assets as well. Again, these are strategies that you should talk to a wealth manager and accountant about, but they're ways of accomplishing the things that most accountants want to accomplish, while still preserving your company's financials for easy sale at the best price.
Yep. No, that certainly makes a lot of sense. I see, particularly, again, because I talk overwhelmingly with, SaaS and others, say in cyber and managed service providers, stuff like that, is we often have a conversation about, they're awesome at creating whatever tech platform it happens to be, but what they don't do, or do too late, or do in a very uneven way, which is essentially what we're talking about as well, is that they don't give the same level of thought, consideration, and depth of building their financial product, whatever that financial product effectively is. Ideally structured for that ideal buyer, strategic, financial, etc. Even potentially a family office that wants to just acquire the whole thing. So it's, just there's often these mismatches around which, and with some very unfortunate surprises. And to your point, if many are leaving in your space, or who you see where 80% are because of a health issue, family, or whomever, that just places incredible pressure on everyone under very trying circumstances, and just undoubtedly leads to kind of a poor outcome, a poor set of outcomes. Yeah.
I love helping founders. We had our office up until recently. We had our office in what amounts to kind of an incubator. It was just shared office space, right? Lots of startups in there. And so I'd be walking throughout the place, just going to get coffee or whatever. And I hear the discussions, and sometimes I just have to stop and say, okay, guys, please don't do that. Let me give you a different strategy, just because, it's these little things that you don't know that'll come up and blindside you. Most commonly, you didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you. Every founder leaves the company, every single one.
Yep. Some
voluntarily, some involuntarily, usually before they thought they ought to, because they're good for a certain period. But every founder leaves. And if you plan around that, you're going to be much better off than if you assume I'm here forever. I'm going to be here now. I'll be here when we're a $13 trillion company. I'm always the center of this company. That's just not, it's uncommon. It's rare. It's unrealistic. The Michael Dells of the world are very rare. It's usually leadership lasts for a period. And so you should plan for you to last a period. And frankly, most founders want to be out after the period, because then it turns more administrative and less fun and innovative. And so if you plan for that, you'll be much better off than if you assume that everything will always remain like this.
Yeah, no, I think it is often, we're all temporary on this space rock flying through infinity that we don't understand. And we're all going to leave. We're all going to leave that company, that work effort, whatever it is. And so, it's just, it is easy to say over drinks. It is more difficult to do actually in person, and actually commit to coming up with a plan, or at least beginning that process to think, yes, I am effectively expendable. I'm someone who is a resource that needs to be displaced at some point in the time. And it's difficult for the ego to accept on many levels.
It is. But knowing that reality, every founder should talk to somebody who has exited at least 2 companies, and kind of get the realistic lay of the land from them. And if you know you're going to leave, and you are, it's better to leave in a planned fashion than an unplanned fashion.
Yep. Life is a better place when you've actually got a plan, even when it doesn't get executed, perfectly. Yeah, indeed. Yep. Indeed. Well, why don't we go ahead and take a short break, and we will be right back. Purple Finch Group helps technology CEOs innovating at the edge of chaos create operational fitness across their technology stack and team of talent. Achieving significant and measurable scale, selling your story, and finding time to think and plan can feel like a bridge too far. So if you're a CEO whose company has found product market fit, but is struggling, or you're a CEO whose company is looking to accelerate existing momentum, we can help with proven blueprints for optimal scale. Shifting from incremental addition to exponential multiplication can be absolutely achieved with less effort and stress. To get in touch, I can be reached at Scott with 2 T's at purplefinchgroup.com. Now, back to the interview. Well, we are back with Daniel from Sweetview Partners. So let's go ahead and pivot the conversation just a little bit and go a little operational here. With yourselves, when you're either making an acquisition, you're becoming either part or full owner of a company, depending on what that structure happens to look like, with obviously other financial partners, given how you guys work. What is the first 100 days, the first 3 or 4 months? What does that look like in aggregate or on average working with, yourselves on post acquisition? What does that look like for you guys as a journey?
So we have several layers that we're working at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're moving through due diligence, we're identifying some of the structural things we can change. It doesn't change anything about how they deliver what they deliver. It doesn't change anything as far as the employees are concerned, unless we're able to change their benefits quickly to something better.
Mm-hmm.
Depends on their contract if they have one. But there's a lot of structural things that we identify in the due diligence that we're going to execute on right away that are just, background things. So that's going on. Mm-hmm. We're almost always in a situation where the owner is ready to step out. Doesn't always happen that way, but usually. Mm-hmm. And so we bring in our operator who's going to see it forward. It's usually somebody who has experience in that industry. Often they come from a much larger organization. Mm-hmm. It's probably because we're always looking for ourselves, but having come from large corporate environments, I know that there are certain levels at which you get stuck or can get stuck.
Yep.
And we can take those folks that have great experience, great ability with P&Ls, even if it's just for a portion of the business, mm-hmm. and have seen a lot of possibility, and put them into a company like this, and immediately they can see 5 things they can do to grow. Mm-hmm. So we bring them in, but for the first 90 days, generally, they're just going to shadow the existing owner, mm-hmm. Who's usually the guy who's running everything, right? Yeah. So for 90 days, just shadow, find out how everything is done today. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. Find out how it's done so that it's replicable, so that we're not causing whiplash with the employees. So that's going on. And then after that, usually the owner starts to step out at that point. They're available to us, mm-hmm. but they step out of day to day. Now our operator will go in there and they'll keep operating. One of the things we've always done, this is just us, right? We have trust issues. That's our fault. One of the things we've always done by that point is we have taken the entire financial operation and moved it externally. So bookkeeping, accounting, little CFO work, we're using an external professional for that now, instead of usually whoever's just been given to, right? Yeah. Bookkeeping is usually done as another duty by somebody in the business that had to learn it. Mm-hmm. It's not done by a financial professional. Yeah. Accounting is usually done remotely by an accountant, and that's normal, and taxes similarly. What we try to do is unify those 3 elements at one organization so that we know that the financials are being tracked properly. A lot of business owners, no fault of their own, finances and the financial laws are very complicated. Yeah. So they run it the best they can, and they record it as well as something that makes sense, but that doesn't mean it's right. It means it's not wrong enough to attract the attention of the IRS, but it's not right. So we've taken the financials, moved them externally, so that tends to operate a lot more efficiently. And now with the day 91, call it, what the operator is going to do is start to set out goals and structures, and we're part of that, for what's going to happen over the next year. So if you're familiar with EOS, it's the rudimentary piece of that. We're going to set goals for the rest of the year that are achievable by everybody that we're setting goals for with the leadership team. Yeah. So as we go forward, we know where we're headed. We all have a view on what is the goal for this year. And we start to work on that. Part of that is going to be the introduction. It's not EOS. We use Scalable OS. But the introduction of an OS, and they all have the same goal, which is to start to create structure inside of the company so that not everything is a question for the leader. So standard structures, standard job descriptions, even standard meeting protocols. Those are set up so we don't waste people's time, so that we know the answers to 80% of the questions the employees are going to ask before they ask them. And we try to bring that structure into place to help the company get ready for the growth that it's going to experience. During that time, first 90 days, we've been looking for exactly the who and where for a professional sales organization. Now that's going to get put in place because they almost never have it.
Yep.
and they've impressively built a company based on referral. Now we're going to take all those stories, arm a sales force, and they're going to go out to people that don't know this company and start to get more sales coming in.
Yeah.
They're going to track it in a CRM. Imagine that. We're going to have all of our company's customer data in one place that's not the salesman's pocket. It's central to the company. All the information's there. So we operate more like a business and less like a side hustle. So all of that data is there for us to refer to. If you have to let go of a salesperson for usually performance, understandable, but they didn't just take their portion of the customer database with them. It's all there centrally. We can slide somebody else in there. They can start making those calls tomorrow saying, hey, Jim's gone, but I'm taking over for him. I understand the last thing we did for you is this. Wanted to give you a talk, see what we can do for you.
Mm-hmm.
Really no speed bumps there. So we start that so that they can start to grow. Yeah. And then we're looking at specific, like I said, technical efficiencies that we can put in place. What systems, what automations these days, what AI tools can we use to streamline what they do, get more leverage, take away a lot of mundane tasks from people, making sure that they understand the fact that we're going to take away tasks from you does not mean that we're going to fire you. Mm-hmm. We very much want to hold on to everybody that brought it to the place where we bought it. So we're trying to take away all the things that people hate to do, mm-hmm. and then fill their time with higher level things, higher cognitive functions that they can mm-hmm. do. That way we can get as much benefit from technology as possible and as much benefit from our people as well. So all of that as a whole is going to take up the rest of the year. It's going to be a combination of evaluations, implementations, achieving these goals, setting new goals, and adapting the company that was very operationally focused to transition to be much more sales focused now. Mm-hmm. In our ideal world, and I know all the operators love to hear this, but in our ideal world, we're doing enough sales so the operator is constantly scrambling to keep up. That is the right level of growth. And that's what we're shooting for that first year, is getting all that set up. Chances are we're going to spend all those wonderful profits we could pocket on all of these things to set up for growth, but it will embed the growth so that the profits going forward are going to be much, much nicer than they were when we acquired it.
Yeah, no, I think, there's definitely a school of thought, and you and I are familiar with this, where, again, someone new comes in and there's a very aggressive, first 100 days, and there are different perspectives on this, where they'll just, push the pedal to the metal thinking the due diligence was all of the work, essentially, or laying all the foundational work, which I would obviously, like you, just disagree with, where you're, even in due diligence, if they have a CRM, but there is no single source of ground truth, it might be sales, but it could also be finance. It could also be the CEO because he or she created it, doing the very best that they could. But,
sure,
it's kind of a mess, or it's just all over the place. And so,
or if it's on a big chief tablet, or it's on 63 different pieces of paper, or yes.
Yeah, or there are only 20 pieces of paper, and that's at key junctures where a key decision is made. We then implement for the third time into the CRM or some other yet disparate system. And yes, I just think, if you are someone who is, without getting into the cottage industry around growth versus scale and so forth like that, I just think pragmatically, laying the groundwork where the team's aligned, everybody understands who and what and why they're doing what they're doing. They feel good about it. They feel engaged, and that you've actually taken the time to care about them. And so they are trained. If the CRM is new, who does what, just pretty, like you say, pretty mundane, boring things. But the reality is that they have institutional knowledge you and your financial partners lack. It's not possible to try and recreate that. And so unless there's egregious behavior, you absolutely want to hold on to as many people as possible. And AI and other tools just enable that to really kind of accelerate once you've got a solid foundation upon which to build. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. That sounds very fair. Very fair to me. And I, again, just like the pragmatism, because there's just, particularly in the tech space, around SaaS, and because everybody thinks they can be funded, via VC money and so forth, and just, go stratospheric instantaneously, that
Right.
there's still a lot of work, but that work is very meaningful for team alignment, operational fitness, for just getting one's T's and I's crossed, which again, your practice is the performance, as I like to say sometimes, if you're a conductor CEO type. And it just makes life much easier, because you can actually forecast now. You can actually know what the hell you're doing and where you're going,
Yeah.
which is just valuable. Yeah.
And the other thing is it enables all sorts of great things for the company, because now you can express in terms that they understand and appreciate to your financial and other partners where you're going. And this is not unique to us. Any company can do this, right?
Yep.
If you've got the systems in place and the practices, you could say, here's our forecast. It's based on this. And here's what we're looking to do. And here's the plan for that. Here's the cost. Here's the anticipated profit. Here's what that looks like. Now you have so much more support for your business, because you've laid out a case that, like, your usually financial partners can understand and appreciate. So they say, oh, I see. This is a well-run company that has thought about what they're doing. And I'm not going to have to come in 6 months and say, hey, listen, we're going to repo everything unless you pay us. They have a plan. They know what the costs are going to be. The profits make sense.
Yep.
Let's lend them money. Let's provide money for them. All your different partners feel much better when you've got that laid out as well.
Yeah. And I think too, once you've got, with the systems in place, the forecasting systems in place, even a small 6-month track record where you can say, okay, Q1, we forecast the following in these 5 areas. We got within 5% of them, or exceeded by 5% in 4 out of 5. Here's where we were slightly short, and these are the reasons why. And so in Q2, we nailed 4 out of 5, and we optimized, or we fixed for this. The fact that you can ideally not just forecast, but also then be very much on target with whatever set of forecasts. And obviously, if you blow through them, that never hurts either as a story.
Right.
I just think, again, lends itself to not just being able to lay out the forecast and make a prediction, but have your prediction and then the predictability, just for all participants, simply reduces both perceived and other risks associated with, well, then, we could do this for you financially. We could do this for you operationally. Suppliers will do this, this, and this. And I just think it just, like you say, allows everyone to share in a story that just not only feels good, but allows them individually and then as a team to operate at a much higher level.
Absolutely. I know of a startup. Well, it's still a startup. It's within the first couple of years of life. They're doing exceptionally well by the sales numbers. They're in the tech space. They have a hot tech product. It's going really well.
Yep.
However, they aren't really careful about their cash flow. They have hired a whole bunch of people. And then, that month came where they said, oh, well, I guess we're going to have to lay off 15 of you. And they did.
Ouch.
And they are looking at, okay, how do we go forward? They don't want to give up equity, which I get, right? At this stage where they are, it makes sense. You want to conserve your equity as much as possible.
Yep.
But at the same time, they're taking, the loans at 50% interest to fund the bridge. And if they keep that up, which they show every sign of intending to do, they're going to destroy their company from the inside, because they're just going to pay out all of their profits in interest, because everything's going so well. Yeah, it's no big deal. Yeah, it's a lot of interest, but we've got all this money coming in. Yeah, eventually that stops, and you're left holding the bag. That if you can't manage your money, you need to find somebody who can help you with that. It doesn't take much. They're not very expensive, but not managing your money is one of the biggest ways to kill your company.
Yeah, whether it's the burn rate or it is profitability,
Mm-hmm.
EBITDA, seller discretionary earnings, et cetera, that you put the label on it that you want, or depending on where you are in your story. Yes, I think we can all, even on a personal level,
Yeah.
appreciate that you can borrow for a long time in some cases,
Mm-hmm.
but that's it does limit your options dramatically. And yeah, if they happen to have a blip in sales for a quarter or there's
Right.
something else and you get that squeeze at that interest rate with who likely those participants, financial partners, and I put air quotes partner, actually are, I
Yes.
am sure that they will be quick to move, shall we say, and
That's
that
right.
there will be very little, if any, pity when it comes to that, or understanding, if you will, or a belief in a storyline that, yes, we made these mistakes. This is our forecast, assuming they even forecast, this is what we believe we can do. And
Mm-hmm.
here's why it happened. It's not going to repeat itself. There's just, I think, the potential for a lack of confidence in that
Oh,
particular area.
and so if anybody needs some motivation to do just a few financial things, learn a little bit more about that, bring in a financial partner.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one of those, so I'm not advocating for me here. I'm just advocating for survival. Um, think about all the work you've put into your product, especially these tech guys,
Yeah.
all that work, and it's going to end up belonging to somebody else because you didn't want to pay attention to the financials. That it was too complicated. There's money coming in, there's money going out. We're all fine. If you don't actively manage that to some extent,
Yeah.
everything you built is going to belong to somebody else, and you're going to get next to zero for that.
Yeah. No, yeah. There are so many things we could talk about right there, but it be respectful, of the time. And you may have answered this. The a question that I've got for you as we get a little closer to the end here is, as a buyer of companies, what advice do you have to specifically tech CEOs, given that that's the focus of the audience here, if they're thinking about selling their company to a financial buyer? The
Mm-hmm.
strategics do have a different focus. Is it basically paying attention to one's financials, simple, pure, what you've just said there, or with respect to the tech companies that you and your team have purchased or been involved with? Because I know you do quite a bit of coaching as well.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? What would be your advice to tech CEOs if they're thinking about selling to a financial buyer?
So selling to a financial buyer is it's heavily financial by the name.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
a lot of it is not only are you driving profit, that's important, but one of the keys, one of the reasons that people keep harping on the MRR, ARR in a tech space, especially SaaS,
Yep.
is because that is ongoing contracted financials that are going to be coming in, right? You have a contract with somebody that until they cancel it, and whatever the penalties are there for that, they're going to keep giving you money. It's scheduled money coming into the business, which is much better than a lot of tech companies. Tech services, for instance, one of my areas, are
Mm-hmm.
very one-off project focused. And so every day you come in, you got to win a new project versus every day you come in, you've got 300 people that are going to send you money today. That's a much better situation than having to find another project. Both work.
Yep.
But that's why ARR, MRR gives you a higher valuation than, call it, project-based work.
Exactly.
You don't have to work nearly as hard for it. So a company that has great financials, and this is counterintuitive, but the less that the owner is required for that business to run, the better.
Mm-hmm.
So owners should be constantly trying to take lower value tasks that they do and give them to somebody else. Hire somebody in person, hire a VA, hire somebody that's going to be a lower dollar value than your contribution, and give that task to them. Because A, it frees up higher dollar value things you could be doing, and B, it builds it into the business instead of building it into you. When we're acquiring, we want as much built into the business and the least amount as possible that the exiting owner has in their head, but isn't built in yet.
Yeah.
I would say those are the two biggest things that if you can do, you're going to have your choice of financial buyers.
Yeah, no, and that makes a lot of, I think, practical sense. I think it's in theory easier to talk about and organize one's financials. It's impossible to argue against that. No one's going to do it. I think for many CEOs, the challenge is the second one, where it's
Mhm.
about, their baby, their ego, their processes. Just they have all the relationships with said, customers. They built it up. It's their identity. It's not just something that they do. And so it feels as though you're shaving away parts of who you are as a human being and the value that you bring to yourself, your company, your community, your family, all that sort of stuff. When, yeah, you attach your identity, your I amness to that, company, which is very understandable.
Sure.
That journey to stop doing that for one, and then begin the process of unwinding that or shifting it in some way,
Right.
I think is one of the most challenging things. It was certainly true to an extent at times for me in corporate, back in those corporate days. Just again, you get wrapped up in that stuff. It's difficult to shift that away. So yeah,
Absolutely.
solid advice.
But
You have,
ironically, it adds value when you do.
and that's exactly right. Yes, it actually brings the payday much closer, and that payday is much more to one's liking and gives you the, I don't know, cash at closing, the freedom, the legacy, the whatever the set of, the checklist happens to be for you, that it brings that much more closer to hand, and you just feel, happier about it. Yeah, happier about it. So you have or are part of a business event in June, a summit that I believe is online, and I'm wondering if you could, because I think it would be really quite valuable, or could be to the audience here. Could you fill us in on some of the details and what you guys are doing, and a few folks who are going to be there, because you're going to be speaking as well, if I remember correctly.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I will be. So this is called the Keys Summit. And what we're doing throughout the month of June is we've got some very high level business speakers the intention is for small business owners and small business leaders. It's somewhere they can go to get some great information on the different phases of running a small business. Okay. So we've got some strategy and leadership folks like Damon John. We've got some folks that are focused on sales and marketing. We've got AI. Roland Fraser is going to come and speak about AI. We've got a few other folks that are talking about AI in your small business, how to use it. Yeah. We've got Jim Dew talking about finance. Nice. You do not want to miss when Jim Dew talks about finance, because he has some great insight for small business owners on finance. We're talking about culture and HR. We're talking about all the little phases of running a small business. And we've got people that are really good at their segment that you can glean something from to apply to your business. And so it's free also, free to attend. It's going to be 2 to 3 speakers a day, all the weekdays of June. So we're going to have lots of speakers there. And obviously you can pick and choose a little bit what you want. Our sneaky plan, I'll just tell you up front. Our sneaky plan is, if you want all the speeches, we're going to charge for the vault, which is a collection of all the speeches that happened during June. That's our sneaky little plan, but it's available to everybody for free. And we encourage small business owners, which we usually define as about 100 employees and down, give or take. There is going to be something they can take away from a lot of these different speeches. And we're really excited about being able to bring this out to everybody virtually. And again, if you want to retain that, we have that option as well. But there's going to be something you can learn about running your small business a little bit better, a little bit more efficiently, for a little better result from a lot of these speakers. Currently, there's roughly 40 lined up, I believe.
Nice.
Great. It's going to be a great time.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Now, I am, so, viewers, because this will go up on YouTube as well as just listeners here. Daniel did give me the link. We are going to include it in the show notes and everything. Is it, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. Could you remind me of what that is, just so people listening would be like, okay, I can remember that?
Sure. It's thekeyssummit.com.
Okay. Yep. And we'll again include that in the show notes, so you have it, because I think it's also Jay Abraham is speaking, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, we've got a lot of great folks.
Yeah,
Jay Abraham was speaking. You never want to miss a Jay Abraham speech ever.
Yeah, he's
John Assaraf. We've got Jim Dew. We've got a number of high-level CEOs, former head of part of Disney, former head of Discovery Plus, I believe. We've got, again, a lot of very experienced folks that have been here before that have some great advice for folks that are still going through it.
Yeah, no, I think really valuable, again, just with all of the changes that have occurred. Again, we're still obviously now very much post-COVID, but still there are still businesses that are struggling and have never recovered, or just experienced all sorts of shift in demand in ways that you would be very difficult to forecast, let alone try and really be prepared for. So for folks that are interested, it is free, as Daniel was saying, throughout the month of June. And there are some really great speakers. So tap into it if you'd like.
In addition to the great speakers?
Yes.
That's one of the places where I will be talking about the number one reason, which we may have given away a little bit, the number one reason to prepare your business for sale today, but also the 3 best ways to do that.
Awesome. Yep. Nope. Sounds good. Folks, check it out. If folks would like to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do that? I know you're very prolific on LinkedIn, but I realize you may be elsewhere. And again, depending on the types of inquiries, prefer something else other than LinkedIn. But how would you like to be, if somebody's interested, to reach out to you?
Best way to do that's going to be email usually, which is dsweet@sweetviewpartners.com. Obviously, I'm all over, like you say, I'm all over LinkedIn. I'm just getting started in some other areas. Sweetviewpartners.com is our website address. Lots of ways to get a hold of us at any of those locations. We're a real small organization, so we're very responsive, and you're going to get, somebody myself or somebody very close to me when you contact Sweetview Partners.
Yep. Sounds great. Nope. That is good. And we'll include all of that in the folks in the show notes for you. The last question that I always ask a guest is the following. We all have various challenges and so forth that we're trying to solve for, excuse me. So I'm wondering, have you got something that you could use help with over the next 12 months with the tech CEO and senior leadership audience that I've got, where someone might say, I could help Daniel out. Let me reach out to him. Have you got one or two challenges at all?
Well, there's a couple different things. The main one for this audience, I think, is we are always, because of what we do, we're always looking for good tools that are usable inside these small businesses. So they have to be affordable for the small businesses, but they can create efficiencies inside those small businesses. One of the things that I'm working on now, frankly, is a lot of how to apply Copilot to a lot of the business functions that we do. It's not built in, but it's cheap. It's relatively inexpensive to put into these small businesses and very powerful. We look for tools like that all the time to increase the efficiency without increasing manpower is the bottom line.
Yep.
So that's probably the top item. Now, if these are all very incredibly successful folks and need a place to invest their all of their revenues, all of their profits, we also are regularly acquiring small businesses, and we're always looking for new small businesses to acquire within our scope, as well as folks that want to participate in those deals. We have very simple structures and make it real easy. But we always love to have new companies to look at and new participants in those organizations as well.
Yep. Nope. Sounds perfectly. I figured that would be one. One is always looking for high quality deal flow, and because it's a challenge, it's a challenge to try and find exactly what's in your wheelhouse, and with a team or a CEO that's interested in doing something a little bit different. Yeah. Nope. That sounds great. No, it sounds good to me. So. Well, we are going to go ahead and wrap up here, I think. Daniel, thank you very much for carving out time to chat with us on the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast. We'll have this out, pretty shortly here. We're filming and so forth here in May of 2024. For all of you out there, appreciate you tuning in. We'll have a new podcast episode and do another interview very soon. Cheers, everyone. Thank you for tuning into the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast, and we hope you found the episode valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast on your favorite platform and leave a review. Putting this podcast together is a group effort, so I'd like to provide a shout out to Heartcast Media and their team for all of the assistance they provide with each episode. If you want to get in touch with me directly, I can be reached at Scott with 2 T's at purplefinchgroup.com. Purple Finch Group is the sponsor of this podcast. We have another podcast episode out very shortly. Stay tuned.